How you doing? This is Jim Fisher, and this is the second episode of The Third Way. It's not right, not left, but the third way. So today I wanted to talk about Austrian economics, why Austrian economics, why am I even talking about this, and how it affects the rest of us. So to start with, why economics? Do you think Obama really understands economics, or Nancy Pelosi, or Boehner, or any of these politicians? They do have a rudimentary understanding of economics, but the economics that they were taught in college is a Keynesian economics, and Keynesian economics comes from a fellow named John Maynard Keynes, who was born in 1883. He came up with something called the general theory in 1936, and the general theory basically says that aggregate demand is what leads to full employment. So the more you increase aggregate demand, the higher you have an employment rate. So the reason this is important is because his point in the general theory was it doesn't matter how you create aggregate demand. You just need to create it. And to create aggregate demand, you spend money. And this is exactly what politicians wanted to hear. So he sold this idea of the general theory to various governments, and they ate it up. And the fiscal policy of George Bush and Obama alike is based off of Keynesian philosophy, which is why you saw the $700 billion bailout, because they were taught that increase aggregate demand and you increase employment. And there is some truth to that. The problem is when you increase aggregate demand based off of government spending, it can only be temporary. And not only is it temporary, but it's a misallocation of resources. If the government prints $700 billion or confiscates it from its tax base and then spends it, it creates misallocated resources, and as we saw in 2007, 2008, it went into the housing bubble. And I'll explain more about the root causes of the housing bubble later, but I just wanted to explain why economics is important and why it's important that we all understand economics, because if we don't understand true economics and the right economics, how can we expect our politicians to understand it? So it's not a great subject, it's not a fun subject, but it's a subject that we all have to understand. And if we don't understand it, we can't expect our elected officials to understand it. We have a bunch of clowns in Washington, and those are the people that we put there. So until we understand it ourselves, we can't expect them to understand it. The problem we have today is not Washington; it's us. So back to Keynes, and in most prestigious colleges and most colleges in general, their economic textbooks were written by a man named Stoddard, who based his philosophy off of Keynesian economics. So there is another way. Keynesian economics basically took over neoclassical economics in the 30s, mainly because he told governments what they wanted to hear. But there's another way, and that's the Austrian perspective. And Austrian economics says something different. Austrian economics says there is a normal business cycle, there is a normal misallocation of resources, and eventually it'll lead to deflation, and it'll fix itself. And so basically what that means is you have small bubbles and small busts. And during the bubble or time of inflation, things are going good, and then eventually you have some degree of misallocated resources, even in a free market, and then that will eventually lead to a recession which will cause deflation, and then the cycle will start over again. Because when you have deflation, you have less demand because people don't have money to spend. There's high unemployment, prices fall, wages fall. But believe it or not, that's a good thing, because when prices fall and wages fall, you also, for the people that do have capital and do have resources, the entrepreneurs out there, this is a time for great opportunity, because that person that may have wanted to start a business, or the businesses that are out there that may want to expand, now have a greater opportunity to do so, because wages are cheaper, prices are cheaper, and so now their capital can go further. So it is the best time for them to invest. And so that's how the business cycle turns around again. So the problem is, and one of the reasons, so you say, well, Jim, why aren't we turning around today? The reason we're not turning around today is because we have Keynesian economists like Ben Bernanke running the Fed, and Obama and Bush alike in the Oval Office, and they see deflation as a bad thing. They're scared. That Ben Bernanke is terrified of deflation. He's said it many a time. And so every time he sees a sign of deflation, he prints more money. And printing more money causes inflation. When you print money and put it into the economy, you're not increasing the means of production. You're not increasing the overall wealth. What you are increasing is the monetary supply. So basically, if you were to print twice as much money as what's out there, you'll increase inflation by 100%, but you don't actually increase the means of production. So every time Ben Bernanke sees any signs of deflation, he gets scared to death and he prints more money. And we've had QE1, QE2, now he's already talking about QE3. And he's actually postponing a recovery because he's not allowing deflation to take hold. So I'm going to talk a lot more about Ben Bernanke, the Fed, and deflation and inflation. It's extremely important to understand. It's the root cause of the housing bubble, the Fed is. And, all this you've heard about Frank Dodd, bank deregulation under Clinton, under Reagan, under Bush. It's got nothing to do with a recession and why we're in a recession. It's got nothing to do with the housing bubble. So it's important that we understand that, because we're blaming things that aren't the root cause for our recession or depression. And until everybody understands that, we can't fix the problem, especially the people like Ben Bernanke that are actually controlling the Fed. So that's enough for today, and I'll try to do another one on my way home tonight, and we're going to talk more about the Fed. We're going to talk about ending the Fed and how we actually get out of this recession. And signing off for now, Jim Fisher, and this is The Third Way.